Welcome. You're listening to The Scoop with me, Kaelen Jones, alongside Myles Duve. Myles, how have you been, man?
I've been great, man. It's been a couple weeks since we've done it, but I'm ready to get back into it, bro. How about you?
I've been good, man, and you're right. It has been a while since we've had the chance to talk about the latest in sports. It's been 2 weeks, and a lot has happened, including the NCAA tournament. So let's start it off with that. One of the things that you wanted to bring up to me, Myles, was some of the Cinderella stories that we've seen over the couple of course of years, or even throughout the history of the NCAA tournament. One question that comes to mind is, does the NCAA need a Cinderella team to maintain national broad appeal? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think over the years, particularly over the last decade, especially, we've become used to, a Cinderella team, at least one, maybe two, making it deep in the tourney, Elite Eight, Sweet 16, sometimes even the Final Four. So I think we kind of take it a bit for granted, but this year we don't really see that. Maybe Northern Iowa, they didn't make it as far as or make as big of a noise or a lot of noise as some of the other Cinderella teams have, but we didn't really see that this year, and it just brought to my mind the years where we had Davidson, Florida Gulf Coast, Butler, VCU, those teams such as those. It felt like there was a lot more hype and a lot more attention on the tournament from people who were more casual fans of college basketball. It seems like now it's really the stricter college basketball fans who are really watching the games, and there's not really a lot of support from those who are just, as I said, just casual. So I think in a sense, in some ways, it does need that Cinderella, that person, that underdog team that everybody can root for, that in a sense will be America's team, for the month or so that the tournament, or a couple weeks or so that the tournament's going on. And we see that in all sports. I think an underdog to root for brings a lot more attention, a lot more appeal to the sport for anybody, because that's just America's way, is to root for the underdog. So I think certainly they do need one if they want to maintain broad appeal. We know that a lot of people aren't fans of college basketball casually, unless they actually go to the school, have connections to players, or are analysts in a sense and really enjoy the sport in a hardcore way. Other than that, I think they need that underdog to root for the other people who don't watch it or don't have connections to really get involved with it.
No, and you bring up a great point, because, even just looking at the field right now, the Final Four, you've got three number ones. You're looking at Kentucky, Wisconsin, and then Duke.
Exactly.
You got the number 17 in Michigan State, but they're usually a fixture in March either way. So you're definitely right. And there is that sense of less appeal to the casual fan, because not as many people are talking about, like you brought up Florida Gulf Coast. I remember a few years ago, everybody was talking about that. Just going back in the past, like you said, Davidson, VCU, even Wichita State a few years back. So yeah, you're right. In terms of the casual fan, you're definitely missing out. At least I agree with you in that sense that in certain ways the casual fan isn't as involved, because there isn't that appeal or that sense of the underdog. Like you said, America's underdog. They aren't in they aren't in the running for it. But I totally agree with you there. Another thing that I wanted to point out though is, let's give some credit to the committee or whoever put together the number one seeding or the seeding, because they got 3 out of the 4 correct. Other than Villanova, even looking at the other scores, it was pretty chalk for the most part, at least for this season. Even looking at Villanova, who probably was the least deserving of the number one seed, they performed well enough in the regular season, and you had Notre Dame, Kansas, not Kansas, but just teams who were higher ranked teams really succeed through the first couple rounds of the tournament, which was fantastic to see it in some parts. I guess if we're gonna reach for underdogs, I guess I say UCLA could have been that underdog, but I think most people dislike them. Maybe Georgia State with R.J. Hunter and that big shot, and people were probably looking to fall in love with that team, especially with his dad. Yeah, him and his dad, that father-son connection. But I do agree with you. At least in this tournament, we definitely missed out on the underdog that we could have fallen in love with heading into the Final Four.
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up a good point about UCLA. That's definitely a team that I guess in a sense they were underdog because they were ranked lower, but still at the same time, I don't think they would have that same appeal just because it is UCLA, So
Right.
that's a high profile school, regardless of where they're ranked in the tournament. It's not going to have that same appeal or intrigue as someone tuning in to see a team like Georgia State, or the other underdogs of the past like VCU and Butler that we brought up, because those are schools that you don't normally see in the tournament or talked about with whoever on the national level of college basketball. So I think that's also the appeal. Is like people want to see a new team, a new college, and something that they really haven't heard about, and it brings a lot more intrigue to it than the casual fan sees UCLA up there. They just say, "Oh, UCLA's over there again," because despite their struggles, not many people outside of college basketball understand that that they've really struggled recently. So, yeah, I think also it's the smaller schools that need to be at that, need to be considered that Cinderella to really push more appeal to broaden it for the NCAA.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But I mean, having said that, the tournament still has been fantastic.
It has been,
It really, it's been great, and the 4 teams that are in the Final Four are definitely deserving of it. So, Myles, taking a look at the Final Four, looking at the west side of the bracket, you're looking at Kentucky and Wisconsin, 2 number 1 seeds, and then on the eastern side of the bracket, you got Michigan State taking on Duke. Let's start with the Kentucky and Wisconsin matchup. The number 1 team in the country, undefeated to this point, and it's crazy to think that storyline isn't enough to draw a casual audience, considering how far they've gone. But you're looking at the best team in the country against arguably the best player in the country, in Frank Kaminsky. Who do you have in this matchup?
I'm rolling with Kentucky, man. I can't go against them. They were my pick at the beginning of the tournament, and I know it's not much of an underdog or much of a surprise pick at this point, and it wasn't at the beginning of the tournament either. But I just can't go against them. I think they have a perfect blend of talent in terms of their defensive ability, and as well as their ability to score on offense. I mean, I guess as a team, their defense is a bit more far ahead than their offense is, but still, if you have a team defense that can really force opponents to pass the ball and look for shots and really run down the shot clock, that really helps your offense as well. So I don't see a team, despite Wisconsin's great run through this tournament, and despite the emergence of Sam Decker, and as well as you said, the player Frank Kaminsky, who's arguably the top player in college basketball, despite that firepower that they have, they just don't have as much as Kentucky does. I mean, coming off the bench, they have Trey Lyles and they have Dakari Johnson, 2 big 6'11" to 7 footers coming off the bench. Nobody else has that. And starting, of course, they have Willie Cauley-Stein, a second-year player who came back, and his experience, I think, is really vital to that team as well. And he's their defensive force in the middle. Karl Anthony Towns, as you know, can't say enough about him. He really stepped up the last game,
right?
And he's probably their best two-way player overall in terms of his offensive game being really far ahead as well. So yeah, I just look at that team, and I don't think Wisconsin can match that firepower. They can play them close, but I don't think it's going to be a closer game than it was against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame caught Kentucky on their heels. I think they were coming off that big win. What was it, 39-78?
Yeah.
And they expected to, blow out the next team that they saw. I think that's understandable. Every great team is going to go through a close one and get tested, and they passed that test. And I think from now on, they're winning the championship, man.
No, I totally agree with you, and for pretty much the same reasons. But let me say this. If Wisconsin is able to shoot the way that they did against Arizona, where you have Sam Decker make pretty much everything he throws goes in the bucket, and then same with Kaminsky, I think they combined for over 50 points in that game. And that's their only saving grace. And, I mean, we've talked about it before. They play. I like to say that they play outside in reversal to inside out. And to me, when you live by the 3, you got to die by the 3. And I feel like this week, I know Kentucky's strength is its inside presence, but I think what Notre Dame did, the way that Notre Dame picked UK apart was by going inside, and it wasn't necessarily they created opportunities on the outside by penetrating on the inside. And I don't see Wisconsin as that team. They don't really have a guy that can penetrate inside. Kaminsky, he's a great player, but he still is. I don't think he's going to be able to muscle Towns down low. So I agree with you. I think that Kentucky's going to roll with it.
Yeah, no question, man. And looking at the matchup on the East bracket, we talked about Michigan State being maybe a Cinderella in the sense that they're a lower seed, but they're playing Duke. They made it all the way over there as a 7 seed. So, and they look like they're a force to be reckoned with in the tournament. So, I mean, what's your takeaway for that game? I mean, what do you think? You think they can potentially upset Duke?
They definitely have a chance. I mean, this is a team that plays with a lot of energy, and they have great backcourt play. Trey Trice and then Valentine are really good players, but ultimately I think it comes down to post-game presence. They don't really have anyone on that inside other than Dawson, who is really inconsistent in my opinion. Then you're looking at Schilling, who doesn't show up all the time. I think that Duke has the at least they've been battle testing, as we talked about with Kentucky having finally their one game. I think Duke throughout the entire season has been battle tested, and I think that they'll be able to pull away from this game with a victory, especially considering the talent that they have. At least in their starting five, I think Justice Winslow is going to have a big game. I just feel like Duke is going to be able to pull out this one, and I think that the run stops for Izzo in terms of if I think it'll come down to who has more talent. I think Duke is the more talented roster.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Also for pretty similar reasons. And you mentioned a guy in Justice Winslow, who I think is the real X factor here for Duke. He really came on later in the season, and he's a fantastic two-way player, and he could potentially be the best small forward in college basketball right now. I mean, it's a toss-up between him and Stanley Johnson. Personally, I'm not sure who I would pick, but anyways, his emergence has really been key to Duke's success lately. When Jahlil Okafor has sort of tailed off a bit, yes, he's put up points, but his rebounding numbers aren't there. His defense is what it is. He's not giving a lot of effort there. But on the other hand, you have a guy with Justice Winslow who plays great on both ends of the floor, puts a lot of effort in stopping the ball on the perimeter, and his two-way ability on the offensive end, he can penetrate, he can attack the basket, he can shoot from outside consistently. So I think he's really the key to Duke's success. And if he can step up, I think that's really what is going to propel Duke over Michigan State. Not to mention as well Tyus Jones.
Yes.
The guys, he's a perfect fit for that team because they don't really need another scoring guard there. They need a guy like him who's a more of a grounded point guard. He can facilitate. He's not uber athletic, but he picks his points. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He can score. He scores when he has to. He passes most times he passes, and he makes the right passes. And I think that's really what's also key to Duke. He has great chemistry with the rest of the players. And at the end of the day, despite the things I've said about Jahlil Okafor over the past few months, I think he's going to be the most talented player on the floor once again. And that's, like you said, that's really what's going to propel Duke over Michigan State in this Final Four matchup.
All right, so both of us have Duke and Kentucky in our final. I have Kentucky winning the championship. And I don't know if you think that Kentucky will go undefeated as well, but I'm banking on your boy Karl Anthony Towns to really perform in the matchup against Jahlil. What are your thoughts on Kentucky versus Duke, since that is our predicted final?
Well, this is a matchup I've been wanting to see. I mean, seriously, I think not only me, but of course all the NBA scouts, NBA GMs, this is what they wanted to see. That Karl Anthony Towns and Duke, Karl Anthony Towns and Jahlil Okafor are 1 and 2, whichever way you pick it, in the mock drafts or in the NBA rankings so far in terms of big boards. And really, I think this is what's going to determine it more so than, pre-draft workouts or any other type of, combine things that they have them go through, because this is, real live gameplay against the top center in the league with a lot more pressure on you in the final. I mean, I don't think anything can beat this floor or the stage that they're going to be set on if, of course, it ends up happening. I'm with you that Kentucky's going to go all the way, and they're going to win it. I think actually they can have a pretty dominant performance against Duke, despite Coach K being the great coach that he is. like I said, nobody in the NCAA has the firepower that Kentucky does. And even if there are doubters, I think primarily those doubts come from the last matchup against Notre Dame against Kentucky. But, that was just a test for them. You look at all the other games prior to that, there's been very few times when Kentucky has struggled to beat another opponent. And I think this can continue for the next 2 games in the tournament, despite Duke's talent. Of course, Duke is probably the best team to potentially beat them talent-wise, but I don't think they let up after that close game against Notre Dame. So, really, I expect Kentucky to win. I'm not going to be surprised if they do. And really, I'm just hoping that we can watch that matchup between Towns and Okafor, because that's going to be a debate, I think, that will go on for the next 5, 6, 7 years, even when they're in the NBA.
Yeah, definitely will. But, Myles, that's been the main scoop. How's that sound? The main scoop? That's been our main scoop here on the Scoop today. But when we come back, we'll be discussing some more draft. But this time we'll be talking some NFL draft. Some players, Marcus Mariota, Randy Gregory, Todd Gurley, some of the names that we'll be discussing when we come back. Stay tuned here on the Scoop. We'll be right back. And welcome back. You're listening to The Scoop with Myles and Kaelen Jones. Myles, let's jump into our rapid fire hot takes segment. We said that we are going to talk some NFL draft. Let's kick it off with Marcus Mariota. I know Jameis Winston had his pro day today, and there was a lot of hype about that, but you've already heard my stance on that. He's in shorts. Nothing's happening too much. But on the flip side, Marcus Mariota, he's been getting some hype, especially in a lot of recent mock drafts by some popular NFL draft pundits. They've been putting him as a second overall pick to the Titans. And we've also heard word from Titans front office men that they're pretty in love with Marcus Mariota and what he brings to the table. So what are your thoughts on Marcus Mariota to the Titans? Is it a smokescreen?
Yeah, it looks like a sort of smokescreen to me. I mean, you said the front office professed some love for him, but it was mainly Ken Whisenhunt, the offensive coordinator. He showed that he loved Mariota, but I think anytime a team comes out like that and professes love for a prospect, it's obviously a smokescreen. It's just too obvious to me. And it's really a smart move for management. Maybe they can get some young assets and some more picks.
No, I totally agree with you. You're looking at the Titans, who have the number 2 overall pick. They just brought in Dick LeBeau, former Steelers defensive coordinator. What they've been doing defensively is really making their front 7, or at least the defense overall, just a stronger unit. I think second overall, that points in the direction of Leonard Williams. I mean, you look at the additions they've made. I believe it's Derek Morgan. They added another outside or defensive end or outside linebacker to kind of secure the edge. And in the class where you have a lot of talented edge rushers, it's surprising that they'd go in that direction. So that's why I think that's a smokescreen, and they'll even end up taking Leonard Williams at the 2nd pick overall, which hurts me.
Right, or they traded. Right.
Yeah, I mean, which very well could be possible. I mean, but we'll see. That's the whistle. There you go. There's our hot takes rapid fire segment. Next up on the list, Myles, Randy Gregory. In the news because he was he reportedly failed a drug test at the combine for marijuana. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, he failed, like you said, but what's more scary to me is the fact that he was a habitual user in his time over there. So I think it's scary, especially with the likes of Josh Gordon, Justin Blackmon recently coming to the league. It doesn't help his prospects coming in. I think he falls outside the top 10 and maybe in the top 15 or so. But, it's definitely going to hurt his stock. If he can quit it like he said he has, he's definitely going to be really a steal for anyone who takes him outside that top 10.
Really? You think that he's going to fall outside the top 10? I mean, see, I'm not as high as Gregory, and we've talked about this before. I'm not too big a fan of him, but what he possesses in terms of traits, you're looking at maybe a Dan Quinn situation in Seattle. Remember a few years ago where they snagged Bruce Irvin really high, surprisingly. I think that he's a perfect Leo fit and Atlanta at number 8 would make the most sense. But at the same time, if he were to pass 8, I don't think that he'll pass New York. I know that the marijuana thing is a big deal, especially like you said with Josh Gordon and other issues. But I don't think that he falls out of the top 10 completely.
Yeah, I think the Saints are for sure going to take him if he's there too at 13.
All right, next up, Todd Gurley. Torn ACL last season, was a front runner for the Heisman up until that point. Do you think that he's a first-round pick, Myles?
It's tough for me to say. You know how I feel about running backs in the NFL. As I said, their shelf life is just not that long, but Gurley was by far the most talented running back in college football for the 2-3 years that he was there. And coming into the draft, like you said, he tore his ACL, but if he can clear that up with the medical doctors before the draft, I think he deserved to be a top, like maybe a top 25 pick. I wouldn't take him inside the top 5 or top 15 like people are projecting. But yeah, I think he's still a first round pick if he's healthy.
I totally agree with you. I think Gurley was easily the best running back in college football.
Right.
You look at the dude, obviously a torn ACL, you never know what's going to happen, at least in his career, moving forward from that type of injury. But I think that Gurley is one of those guys where you can't pass up on that type of talent. I know that the running back position, like you said, has a low shelf life, but you're looking at a guy with the kind of talent that he possesses. I'm not letting him slip out of the first round, personally. I'd be very, very, very surprised if that were to happen. San Diego. Wouldn't be surprised at all, to be honest. It makes the most sense. Now, Myles, let's jump into some pro comps. I know the draft is obviously a fixture on our show. Some of the players that intrigue you. Who's the first pro comp that you could make, at least looking at this draft class? You got a minute.
I'm looking at your guy, man, over there at Arizona State. Wide receiver Jalen Strong. It's a really deep wide receiver class coming in again, but we have Jalen Strong, who's probably underrated at this point. He's ranked behind the likes of, of course, Devontae Parker, Kevin White, Mark Cooper, and even DGB, and some other receivers that really I don't think deserve to be ahead of him. I think when you look at him, I see Marcus Colston. He's sure-handed. They may not be a similar size, but he's probably the most sure-handed prospect in this draft. And he can quietly produce for a team for years to come, and I think he can be a franchise centerpiece as that number 2 sure-handed receiver.
See, that'd be interesting because he's my guy, man. You know that. Flipping it over, real quickly, let me say Kevin White of West Virginia. Let me make the comparison to him to Julio Jones in Atlanta. We've heard it a lot, obviously, but looking at him, just the ability to really make plays after the catch, just use his big size to go up there and snag the ball. I think that you're looking at a really sure-handed target in him. The comparison makes sense. I'm saying Kevin White to, Julio Jones.
Yeah, it does. I like Kevin White to Julio. Personally, I would go Brandon Marshall. Very similar games. Another guy, we're going to stick with the receiver here, Brashad Perryman. I know he's a guy that you like. What's your take on him in terms of a comparison? He's really emerged lately. Well,
lately, there's a reason why, man. And I'm telling you, that ECU game where he ended up catching the game-winning catch was really spectacular. And a lot of scouts got to fall in love with that kind of tape. He's a fast guy. He's got the size. The only question mark, at least for me, is his speed. Looking at him, he reminds me of Mike Wallace. And that's probably why when you're looking – well, it makes the most sense because when you're looking at McShay's most recent mock draft, he had Perryman projected to Miami, which kind of makes me wonder why Miami would kind of give up Mike Wallace to get another version of Mike Wallace. But at the same time, Perryman possesses some great speed. He's going to be a deep threat regardless of his hands or not. He's definitely a great asset after the catch. But the difference with him, I think that he'll be more dominant in the intermediate passing game. But I think that Mike Wallace makes the most sense in terms of pro comps for him. Well,
that's a little high for him. Personally, for me, I hate to say it, as a guy you're familiar with, Denarius Moore, man. He has the speed, just like Moore did coming in. But I don't think there's any reason he should be considered in the top 30 right now. I mean, I know he has the 40 speed with the 4.23 or 4.26 that he ran, But like you said, he struggles with his hands, and he had a great game at UCF, but it's too up in the air for me. I'm just not sure about him yet, and I don't. Just to touch on what you said about Miami, I don't think they take a receiver because they have Kenny Stills and they have Jarvis Landry. So yeah.
No, I agree with that too.
If we're gonna jump to another another Perryman. Sorry. And what do you know? He's out of Miami. Denzel Perryman, the linebacker. What's your comp for him? What do you think about him?
Well, from what you've told me and from what I've seen, he's a big hitter, and I personally can't think of too many other big hitting linebackers in the NFL right now. I'm drawing a blank, but man, I've seen the comp. I've seen one comp of him being compared to Ray Lewis, and I don't believe that at all. I think that's just a you thing.
But they do have similar games.
That's what I'm saying. From what I've heard, I haven't seen enough of Perryman. I'm not gonna lie, but he does remind me a bit of Nick Roach, in a sense. It's a weird comp, but I feel like that's the most comparable pick that I can make for him. What about you?
Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I know him. I've watched some film on him, but like you said, I'm not too familiar with him. But the guy I'm gonna go with is DeQuell Jackson. I think they're really similar in terms of DeQuell. He's an athletic player just like Denzel is, but he's really on and off. I think Perryman, that's probably his floor in terms of the NFL, which isn't a bad floor. But I think his ceiling is a guy like maybe a lesser Ray Lewis. I really think he has that talent. He just needs to show the consistency. His only struggles is where he relies too much on his athleticism and speed. But other than that, he has all the talent. He just needs to really refine his skills a bit.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing with me. Unfortunately, I just haven't watched enough of Denzel Perryman, so I apologize if that is not the right comp whatsoever. But
No problem.
moving forward, let's jump into some more serious topics. Or actually, take that back. We're going to save that for next week. So is that the end of our rapid fire hot takes?
Takes,
that's the end of our rapid fire hot takes. How about that?
Fast. Yes.
It did. But okay, when we come back, hopefully, maybe, possibly, Kevin Avery, probably doubt it. But if not, we'll still be talking some NBA when we come back. Los Angeles Lakers, the Golden State Warriors who've been rolling, as well as the Kevin Love situation in Cleveland. We'll be right back here on The Scoop. Stay tuned. And welcome back. You're listening to The Scoop here with Myles and Kaelen Jones. Myles, let's jump into our basketball segment. The Golden State Warriors, they clinched number 1 seed overall for the Western Conference in the playoffs. They've won a franchise record, I believe, 60 games. Currently taking on the Los Angeles Clippers as we speak. Chef Curry put Chris Paul on his mixtape if you haven't seen it already. But Myles, what are your thoughts on Golden State? We know that they've been the dominant team in the Western Conference throughout the course of the season. Do you think that they can sustain this type of effort heading into the playoffs?
Yeah, well, Chef Curry, as you said, is definitely balling out of his mind, right? So that's the key to it all. Can they do it? I think they can. They definitely have the personnel. When you look around the league, I don't think there's a team that's deeper than they are. In terms of that, their starting lineup is probably the most skilled, if not one of the most skilled on paper. And then you look at their bench; they have a guy in Andre Iguodala coming off the bench. Another one actually David Lee, who would be starting on most teams, or at least maybe a sixth man or off the bench. He's barely getting minutes here for Golden State. Barbosa, Sean Livingston, and they just have so much depth on their roster. I think it's really hard to compete with them. And I think what's really another key to it, I talked about Curry. We all know Klay Thompson is great and he's really improved this year. But Draymond Green, man, that guy is keeping that team afloat. His ability to play any position from the shooting guard all the way to the center spot. I think that's so invaluable. So you get a guy like that with his versatility, his level of energy and level of effort and skill defensively as well, and his ability to shoot the three ball. It's really irreplaceable, and nobody can compare to that. So if you have a player like Draymond Green who can play on the wings and also play at your center, and then you have a guy in Sean Livingston who has a size to play a small forward, but his traditional position is point guard, no one can match that. I think that this team can win it all if they can stay high and continue to make threes. That's really the question for them, because as we know, they live by the three, but they haven't died by it yet.
Right.
Yeah, that's the question for them. So at the beginning of the season, I really wasn't, or actually at the halfway point, I really was not keen on their chances just because I didn't like them coming in. I thought they would cool down, but they haven't, and they've given me no reason to believe that they won't stay hot coming into the playoffs.
See, I agree with you on that point of the three-point shot, but let me ask you, Myles, do you think that anyone can beat them in a 7-game series if they had to go the full course of the 7 games? Well,
are we talking just the West here? I mean,
yeah, just the Western Conference. I mean, if you want to throw in the East, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the West here, I would have said OKC, but as we know, the Durant injury is something we're going to talk about soon. That really put a damper on their chances, despite the trades that they made. So Memphis, I don't think they have a chance. I'm going with San Antonio, man. The old dogs. I think that with Kawhi stepping up now, and then Tony Parker finally, showing who he is, showing the real Tony Parker finally standing up at the end of the season, that's really going to be key to it all. They have the depth, they have the talent, and they have the camaraderie together to really beat that Golden State team. And honestly, I think if they meet, I think that they will beat them down the line.
Really? See,
it depends, but that's what I'm thinking. That's the only team I see, though, man. What about you, though?
See, I agree with you, because looking at the Spurs, if anyone's going to beat them, it's going to come down. I think the only okay, let me say it this way first. The only way that the Warriors are going to lose is if they beat themselves, 1. And then 2, if you face, again, like you run into a hot veteran unit like San Antonio is, I think those are the only 2 threats really to Golden State. But I agree with you for the most part. I don't think anyone can really compete with the overall talent and depth of this roster. Looking at it, like you said, David Lee would be starting on most teams, and he's been riding the bench and hardly getting any minutes. But you're just looking at a really complete team when you're talking about the Warriors. Like you said, Barbosa, Livingston have been contributing greatly, as my Warriors friends never let me forget. They've been on fire throughout the course of the year, and like you said, they haven't cooled off. And I've been waiting for it, but I mean, this is a really talented team. I don't see them losing.
Yeah, and here's the thing: what is playoff basketball at this point?
Right?
Many people are saying that you can't shoot threes and win in the playoffs. You can't play the way they're playing and win in the playoffs. But what is playoff basketball now? I mean, the way that the league has changed, there's not really much of an emphasis on the post like there used to be, or slowing the game down.
Mm-hmm.
Pace is continuing to increase. The 3-ball is more present in games than it ever was, and it's all about speed now. I mean, I don't think that changes when you go into the playoffs. Not at this point anyway. Maybe in previous years, but no, not at this point. I think really the only thing that changes is your defensive intensity has to go up, and that's it. I just don't see it happening. They can get cold maybe in the playoffs, but I don't see them getting cold for a whole series. Maybe 1 game, maybe 2 games, but I don't see it happening for a whole series at all.
That's the crazy part. That's the crazy part to me. Is usually when we're talking about 3-point shooting teams or teams that rely on the 3-ball, like we're talking about teams who at some point their fire is going to go out, or at least out of 7 games, they're only going to be on fire for 3 out of the 7. With Golden State, they're going to be on for 5 out of 7, which is the crazy part. If not 6 out of 7. And so I agree with you in that aspect. And should Bogut or even David Lee be healthy, they'll have presence on the inside. So this is a complete team, even defensively, which my friend, again, he never lets me forget that. They're a great defensive team. So I think they've only lost like 1 game they haven't lost yet when they hold an opponent under 100 points or some crazy stat like that. So I definitely agree with you. This is it's a rarity to see this type of complete team with a strong suit of the 3-point shot, and I think that's
we never have.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's changing the whole game of basketball. I think they're revolutionizing it, and so depending on how far they go, I think that's really a test in a sense of, can we really take this whole 3-point shot thing and succeed in the playoffs? I think they're really the first people to really test that for the rest of the league.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because in the past we saw teams where, again, they just relied upon that, and that was their only strength. With the Warriors, they're able to do so much, as we discussed before. But we touched on it earlier. You touched on it. You said one of the teams that you felt that probably would be able to contend with Golden State, should their main player been healthy, would have been the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they're going to be without Kevin Durant, who I can't remember. Wow, I'm drawing a blank. Surgery on his knee, I believe.
On his foot.
Yeah. And he's going to be out for 4 to 6 months, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, 4 to 6. And it's his third surgery, I believe, in the last year on that same foot. So yeah, it's scary, man. I think the injury itself has a really tough impact on them, despite the emergence of Westbrook and despite the trades that they've made. Trading for Enes Kanter, trading for Augustine, Kyle Singler, and whatnot. But we know that Durant is the key cog to that team, no matter what. And it's really scary because we've seen players struggle with foot injuries in the past. You could look back at Yao Ming. You can look at, I believe even Tracy McGrady had some struggles with his foot. And it's just tough to see that because we don't know. It's a lot of gray area. We don't know how he'll look in the upcoming season because the foot is probably the hardest area of your body to heal, especially as a basketball player when you put so much pressure on that and you constantly have to elevate. So it's scary, and I think for his career, I think he's also a little bit in the dark in terms of what the outcome is going to be. I think everybody's really just anxiously waiting, like what's going to happen when he first steps foot on the floor. Right. One thing that he does have going for him is that most players who have struggled with foot injuries have been big men. Bill Walton is another one. They're really heavy, up top. Durant doesn't really have the heavy build up top, so I don't think he'll put as much wear on it as those guys did. But in the time being, it's going to be tough for OKC to even contend in this playoffs. I think Westbrook is carrying them afloat barely in the regular season. He's playing great, but they're still pulling games out really close, and that's not going to fly in the playoffs. Right. I think really they just need to look to next season and hope he's healthy because that's their only shot in the next few years to really win anything.
And I believe Sam Presti, their GM, he blew off any discussion of them giving up Kevin Durant. But I mean, you just said it. Russell Westbrook has been leading them to wins, albeit they've been really close. Do you think that there's any shot? I know that Presti's blown it off before, but do you think that there's any shot still that Kevin Durant doesn't return to the Oklahoma City Thunder following next season?
Well, as we speak about this, Durant is quoted. He wants to stick with one team for his entire career, and he would love to get his jersey retired in OKC, and that's a new quote. Players say what they have to say. That's all I'm going to say about it. And we'll talk about that a little more with the Kevin Love situation later. But looking at Durant, will he leave? I think it's really dependent on what happens next season, and also what happens with his injury. I mean, what if this injury continues to labor on a bit? Will he really have the power to say, "Oh, I want to pick my destination and go wherever I want," without really giving that chance to OKC over the last couple of years? Because he struggled with injuries, I don't think he really have that power. But if he's healthy next year and he plays great, but OKC still doesn't get to a title shot, I don't think it's out of the question at all. I'd give it maybe a 70% chance he stays, 75% chance he stays in OKC, 25% he leaves somewhere else, and that could change throughout the season. But I don't think it's completely a sure thing he's going to stay there whatsoever.
See, what I found interesting is that somehow the two are going to have to be able to coexist once again with each other. And I can't remember what the difference in production for Westbrook was when Durant was there, but I find that interesting that this is even a discussion. I mean, even though I brought it up, it's just.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't the first to. That I'm sorry, but it came across my mind because I think that's interesting when you have there's two superstars in their own right, obviously in Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. We've seen OKC kind of be forced to move talented players before. James Harden, who's in the running for MVP right now. Even looking at Reggie Jackson, who's really not thriving, but he's logged a couple. Yeah, he's logged a triple double or two during his time in Detroit. So I don't know what I'm getting at here, but it's interesting to me that OKC always has so much talent, and to this point they've had to given up so much, but they're still in the same spot where they are, at least in terms of contending as a title contender. They're still without a ring. I mean, they got into that one finals appearance and they won only one game, albeit against a really talented Miami Heat squad. But it's interesting to me because they've seen so much talent come through the franchise, at least at this point, in such a short amount of time. It's interesting that whether or not I think the biggest thing for me this is what I'm getting at. The biggest thing for me is whether or not Kevin Durant will be healthy, and whether or not this team can continue to be centered around him and kind of thrive or succeed with him as a centerpiece. I think that's the point that I'm trying to get at there.
That's tough. I mean, look, you established that Durant and Westbrook they play well together. I mean, they're very talented players. We both know that, and they still play better when they're with each other than when they're without each other in terms of the overall team play. They're a better team when they're both on the floor. And like you said, they're still in the same spot. So what do you look at when you see those two players thriving, continuing to improve individually, they've actually played with better chemistry on the court over the past couple seasons than they were in previous years. So, I mean, they're developing their relationship as well. But like you said, they're still in the same spot, and they're still actually regressing a bit in terms of where they get in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you look at? I think you look at coaching. Scott Brooks he's not the greatest coach in the NBA, that's for sure. And I don't think he's up there in the top 5 or top 10. I think he's really benefited from having that young talent there, but I don't think he has the ability to use it to its best ability. And I think that's why we see them struggle. The guy is really, his offense is really limited. I think if you took Westbrook out of that offense and you took Durant out of the offense, you'd see how limited it really is. Really, those guys create for themselves and they create more opportunities, but really there's not much that you could do with Scott Brooks' idea of an offense. And defensively, I don't think they're necessarily the best team either. I don't know if he pushes them hard enough on that respect as well. So I think that's really the key to it all is coaching. So there's a lot of factors playing into Durant leaving. And coaching, I think, is also going to be one of them. If they end up firing him after the season and going with another guy, I don't know any names out there who are potential candidates, but whether it's in college ranks or an assistant, that could also change Durant's opinion of OKC if that coach ends up seeing success or if he doesn't end up seeing success. But I think really the main factor is Scott Brooks.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that as you said that. Like they've developed so much talent in such a short amount of time, but they haven't been able to do anything with it.
Right.
And I know a few years ago, and or not even just a few years ago, just within the last couple of years, we've been hearing about whether Scott Brooks would be out as Oklahoma City's coach. Like it comes up at least once or twice during a season, and not so much this year because Durant's been gone. But I agree with you. I think something's got to change because, again, you've seen so much talent walk through the door and then walk out the door. And at some point when your plan isn't working, it's not Vinny Del. It's similar to a Vinny Del Negro situation, to be honest. Where you're getting to the playoffs and obviously you're doing a great job, but the Clippers aren't a championship caliber team. Oklahoma City is a championship caliber team, and they're not getting to the championship. Nonetheless, the Western Conference Finals, I think, aside from the year before when Westbrook got hurt, that was the first year they didn't. And I don't think that they'll get there this year unless they don't face the Warriors or who's the number 2 seed? I apologize. I'm drawing blanks, but
I think Memphis, I believe.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, it's such a tough road for them, and I feel like you're missing out on Durant, especially. He's not. I don't think he's necessarily at the peak yet of his career, but
he's getting there.
He's pretty damn close. So I mean, you don't want to miss out on that, especially with him and Westbrook. It'd really be bad to see neither of them win a title, especially Durant.
It really would. I mean, they can build a dynasty there. Just one more thing. I know we've been talking about this for a while, but another thing that really bothers me is the whole Reggie Jackson fallout. I know that players want to start, and I know that they get upset if they don't, but I think it's also on the coaches to really create a better sense of camaraderie, and I feel like that's where Scott Brooks sort of failed, is that there's no reason that Reggie Jackson should have been acting that way, despite being upset. There's no way he should have been that vocal about it, or that open about his distress in terms of organization. I think that's a coaching thing. You have to build a certain culture. You know what I mean? I think he failed at that respect as well. I don't think Scott Brooks, like you said, it's been talked about, but it hasn't been discussed as much as it should, in my opinion. I think eventually OKC management, I think they recognize it, and I think they're going to make a move this summer or the next.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see whether they do or not. But, Godspeed the Kevin Durant. Get back soon. The league is definitely not the same without him. That's the players side. But like you said, Kevin Love, we're talking about dynasties. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they've been trying to build a dynasty, or at least LeBron has in Cleveland. Kevin Love hasn't been fitting in so much. Reports earlier in the season that he was kind of disgruntled with his positioning and his role with the team. And LeBron, obviously that tweet where he's saying you could be a part of it is something great and whatnot. But
don't try to fit in.
Yeah, exactly. Stop trying to fit out to fit in. If that's not a subtweet, I don't know what is. But looking at the Kevin Durant situation, or excuse me, not the Kevin Durant, the Kevin Love situation in Cleveland. Let me ask you: is Kevin Love leaving more likely than him staying at this point?
Honestly, I think it is. And I don't want to, toot my own horn here, but as soon as he joined, I was telling our friend Kevin, who should be on the show right now, I was telling Kevin, Love is not staying there. He's not going to stay at Cleveland as soon as that trade happened, because I just couldn't see him being comfortable with being the 3 seed, or not the 3 seed. I'm sorry, being the third player in terms of the third option. Basically, I just couldn't see him being comfortable with that. So many years, UCLA, he was the number 1 option there. Despite Westbrook being on that team, he was the number 1 option. Minnesota, all those years, I believe he played about 5-6 years there. He was the number 1 option by far, no question. As soon as he got there and once he left, it's hard for a player to get used to going from number 1 to number 3. I mean, number 1 to 2 maybe is doable, like Dwayne Wade had to do in Miami. But going from number 1 to number 3 is really, really hard. And I think a guy of Kevin Love's personality, you saw in Minnesota, he was getting disgruntled with the team and their failures, and their lack of success. You could tell that he's really affected emotionally by a lot of things when it comes to basketball, and more so than other players. And I guess you could compare him to Chris Bosh, because he's the guy who had to take that third wheel sort of thing in Miami. So. And Chris Bosh, he's still there in Miami. He's not as upset about it as Kevin Love was, or Kevin Love is currently. So, I think he's definitely leaving. I just don't see any way around it. I think he needs to go somewhere where he can thrive. And a team that can use him to his best abilities, because I don't think Cleveland is doing that either. They're really neutralizing his game and just forcing him to be a stretch forward when he can be much more than that. So, I think it's honestly best for both parties. But in the long run, it makes Cleveland look really, really bad for trading Andrew Wiggins for him while he's thriving there in Minnesota, But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, and, you nailed it on the head. It's unfortunate because I was opposite of you. I was thinking, okay, Kevin Love will willingly take on the role that Chris Bosh took in Miami. And it's funny that Chris Bosh had to give up so much, but to really thrive in that role over the course of the LeBron era in Miami. And it's unfortunate that Kevin Love hasn't been as willing to take on that role. I think that's what it comes down to, though. When, at least in terms of succeeding in Cleveland, I felt like the team was always going to be built similar to the way that was in Miami, where you have two dominant ball handlers in Wade and LeBron, and now you have Wade and Irving, two stud guard forward play where you're having LeBron pretty much be the centerpiece, and you have to be willing as, like you said, that stretch four kind of, and that's the role that Chris Bosh played, even though that wasn't technically his role in Toronto prior to being in Miami. He was more of a give me the ball type of guy where he'd be able to dominate in the post. Kevin Love isn't getting that type of love in Cleveland. And Chris Bosh, while he was able to take that role willingly, Kevin Love is disgruntled about it. And, that's to me, that's part of the game, where you have to be willing to accept your role. Not to say Kevin Love isn't a team player, but to me, like LeBron says, you can be a part of it or you can not be a part of it. And to me, at this point, Kevin Love, if he wants to succeed in Cleveland, he's got to be willing to take on the part. But at the same time, that's the reason why I agree with you. I don't think that he's going to be back in Cleveland following this season at all.
I mean, yeah, and it sounds like you think it's really on Love. Am I right? I mean, in terms of
more or less.
Yeah.
More or less.
I mean, to me it's tough because of course it's on Love to some extent, but I would say a lot of it is on the entire environment around him, whether it's the coaching staff or particularly the head coach or LeBron James. I mean, I think you look at the whole Miami situation and with Chris Bosh, and I mean, you're the Miami fan, so you can tell me, but I think when Chris Bosh was there, yeah, he struggled when he first got there, or actually throughout the entire Big Three era, he sort of struggled because he wasn't used to being in that third wheel. But it seemed like there was not a lot of criticism coming from LeBron James or coming from Eric Spoelstra. It seemed like most of the criticism was coming from the outside and from the media and the fans, but not from within, and it wasn't internal. And I feel like that's why it made it a lot easier for Chris Bosh to feel comfortable. When I look at Kevin Love, I'm like, okay, you have the media coming at you one way, you have the fans coming at you, you have LeBron coming at you subtly or not so subtly, and you have the head coach also coming at you in a different direction, sort of criticizing your game in a bit, or criticizing you as a max player, saying you weren't a max player, and he's doing that directly. There's not really a lot of support. So, I mean, I don't know if you can really expect the guy to go about his business and feel that comfortable in a team where nobody's really making him feel that comfortable.
Yeah,
that's the difference to me. I don't know.
That's a good point. No, that's a great point. I mean, you're right. Man, the environment is definitely it plays a role, because when you're accepted in one place, like Chris Bosh was, I think that was more of LeBron getting his footing. So I don't think he could step on any toes as he could with Cleveland, like when he has experience. But that's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah, I don't know. LeBron's kind of annoying me, man, with his whole subtweet thing, and just I don't know how much of there's not a lot of leadership there to me,
right.
But that's another argument. They're doing well right now, and he seems to be loving it there in Cleveland. I just don't think Love is going to be there with him.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Speaking of Love, the guy that they got in the trade for they gave up in the Kevin Love trade with Andrew Wiggins, who the other night, I don't know if you saw it, dunked twice on Rudy Gobert. Got stuck on the third attempt, but regardless, the dude is, as we've said it before, his offensive game is beginning to catch up with his defensive game. And, I mean, he's been balling out. Jabari Parker's been out with the torn ACL, so Andrew Wiggins, is he your Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, he's going to get it, man. But I think the real question is he really the runaway favorite here? I think there's not even a doubt in anybody's mind that he's going to get it. So when everybody talks about the other rookies who are playing well, I think they all understand these are just the runners-up. But it seems like the race has gotten a lot closer than it was, let's say, at the first half of the season. you have a guy that we both really like in Elfrid Payton for Orlando. I believe he put up 2 triple-doubles in a row, one on national TV, and he's been playing actually really well over the past 2 months. Played really versatile stat lines. His scoring, he's still not the greatest shooter, but he's scoring in the ways that he knows he can be effective, and that's really driving to the basket where he's excelled. And then Nikola Mirotic, man, I can't say enough about this guy.
That's true. Good point.
Yeah, he's 22 years old, or 23 actually, 23 years old. And so, of course, he's a little more far ahead than most rookies. But the guy is playing phenomenal, man. I mean, his versatility, able to play small forward, power forward, but yet he can facilitate really well, rebound the ball, shoot the ball, and he plays hard defensively. I don't know if that's more credit to Coach Thibodeau, but still, he's playing out there, playing hard defensively, and he's really kept that Bulls team afloat with the absence of Jimmy Butler and the absence of Derrick Rose. So I think he, to me, is probably the second overall in terms of the rookie standings. And I think if you had Mirotic playing like this many minutes at the beginning of the season until now, by far he'd be the rookie of the year runaway. And I'm just going to throw another guy out there. I don't want to leave him hanging. Is Nerlens Noel.
Right, that's my guy.
yeah. He's, I was a big fan of him coming in to this season. I thought he was going to do really well. I think I kind of expected too much. I think a lot of people expected too much from him early on because it was still his first NBA season.
Right.
Despite being drafted 2 years ago, he got hurt and he couldn't play. So, it's still his first NBA season, first NBA games, and I think I expected him to come out and pretty much ball, but he didn't do that until now. And he's showing his true potential. I don't have any numbers here. I'll post them up in a second, but he's doing extremely well. So I think he's my third option there, him and Elfrid Payton.
Yeah, no, I got some numbers for you, actually. I mean, he's got 1.8 blocks, 1.8 steals a game. He's the only or at least he's on pace to be the only rookie to ever average nearly 2 blocks and 2 steals a game, according to basketballreference.com.
Right.
And then on top of that, I agree with you in that aspect because he's anchoring, which quietly is a top 10 defense. I mean, I know that the Sixers aren't the most exciting team to watch, but like you said, Noel has been a great fixture on a young squad, and I think that eventually his talent's going to develop. And like you said, it's about patience with rookies. And like he was drafted 2 years ago, like you said.
Yeah.
I really feel like he's come on as of late. Early in the year, I mean, he produced so little to the point that I dropped him my fantasy team. I mean, let me just say that. And now I'm wishing I had him back because he's been playing really well. But when you're talking about Andrew Wiggins, I just feel like in terms of at least impact or living up to the hype, at least who's done that more, I think it's I think I'm going to go with Wiggins. And I think that's why, like, nationally, you're going to get more people to say Wiggins is because he started off at least not hot, but better than what Noel did, and he lived up more to expectations in terms of number 1 overall pick. So at least in Rookie of the Year award, I understand where people are coming from with that. But if we were going to go based on the last 2 months or so, or maybe less, then I think Noel is definitely a contender, as well as Elfrid Payton, who I watched drop a triple-double, I believe, against the Hornets on
Sunday. He had 2 in a row, man.
Yeah, which was ridiculous. And I was a fan of him. Me and our guest analyst, KC, we both watched some of his tape. We were both like, yeah, this guy's going to be a stud. And it's cool to see him, like, both those players kind of grow into the role. But like you said, Andrew Wiggins got off to a better start than the other two.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and if we were doing the last 2 months, I'd personally go Mirotic over both those guys. But yeah, it's tough to argue against Wiggins just because of the better start. But one thing that's tough for me is that he's still on a losing team that is really losing terribly and probably having the worst season that they've had in a while. So that's kind of tough for me to put him on that pedestal just because there's not really any other talent around him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But then again, you could also turn that around and make it a positive for him. So all in all, the guy is playing extremely well. I think he has a bright future, and it's good to see him do well. I think that it's really disappointing that Jabari Parker isn't healthy because I think he'd certainly be contending
I agree.
For the spot, especially being on the Bucks, who are in the playoffs in the East. I think honestly he would be winning it if he were healthy. It's kind of disappointing that he's not here.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you know what's more disappointing? This is going to be it for our show.
Okay. Yeah, man. I guess it is, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, it definitely has. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. I'm Kaelen Jones alongside my man Myles Duve. Make sure to listen to the Scoop podcast. Make sure you check us out on iTunes, on YouTube, wherever you get the chance to hear it, even if it's on SoundCloud. But thank you again for joining us. From Myles, I'm Kaelen. This has been the Scoop. So long.
Peace out.